You need to hear this if you like language or history. Slang is built on each previous generation finding better, shorter, more efficient ways to improve on the language of their parents, while developing ways to communicate so they don't know what mischievements the kids are getting into. The exact origins of the word slang are unknown, but it first appeared in print in 1800 to describe the speech of London's criminal and disreputable classes. It's likely that the term was used much earlier than that. Romani gypsies, Scandinavian variations, the French, borrowing from Dutch or Middle Low German, related to the Norwegian words slengjord and slengjenam, which mean mocking word and derogatory nickname respectively, or possibly related to the verb to sling, which means to throw. The word's primary meaning may have shifted from vagrant jargon to vulgar speech because of the assumption that slang used by people outside of social respectability must be categorized as outside the linguistic equivalent. My question is, wouldn't slang have existed with the existence of spoken language and offspring? Surely Cain and Abel and their siblings communicated with each other using more efficient devices Adam and Eve might not have immediately understood. Revolutionary war slang from the 1770s and 1780s is more interesting than you might think. Here's number 50, scranch. Definition: to crunch or make a crackling noise, especially while eating something crisp or hard. Context: he scranched on the hard biscuit while staring out to sea. 49. Gut-foundered, extremely hungry, starving. Regional Newfoundland slang 48, fishy, sus, suspicious, or questionable. Something that seems odd or not quite right. Context: his explanation sounded fishy to me. It also meant drunk, as in drinks like a fish. Possibly no one invented more ways to say drunk than colonial Americans. Fishy was meant to also imply the way the drinker looked. Bleary eyes and turned down mouth corners make a drunk resemble a fish. 47, macaroni. A metaphor for fancy, like an Italian foppish or excessively fashionable young man. The term comes from a trend among British dandies who adopted the Italian word macaroni to describe their cosmopolitan and extravagant fashion. In use, he fancies himself a macaroni with his flashy clothes and powdered wig. When Yankee Doodle called that feather in his hat macaroni, he wasn't being silly. Macaroni was a term used at the time to refer to being fashionably upscale and intentionally flashy, over the top, and androgynous, which sounds more like French style to me. 46, twistical, crooked or dishonest, twisted in nature. It can also imply something that is complicated or difficult to understand. In use, the deal sounded twistical, so I decided to walk away. This word, which, according to the Dictionary of Americanisms, was primarily used in New England, feels like it could just as easily have been invented today. 45, savvy, savvy, or savvy. To understand or comprehend. It can also refer to knowledge or practical understanding, from the French word savoir, to know. Savoir-faire is literally knowing doing, idiomatically meaning know-how. Ever seen the cartoon Savoir-faire is Everywhere? We still use this word in phrases like computer savvy. In colonial times, it was actually used more like the way Jack Sparrow uses it in Pirates of the Caribbean. He might say savvy. 44, Adam's ale, water. The phrase refers to the biblical Adam, who had only water to drink in the Garden of Eden. To quote a 1792 American poem by Philip Freneau, a spring that never grew stale, such virtue lies in Adam's ale. 43, shaver. A young adolescent boy or lad. They just started shaving. It was often used affectionately or humorously. Context: the little shaver was eager to join his father's trade. 42, jollification, festive celebration or merrymaking. Context: the jollification lasted well into the night after the victory. 41, Simon Pure, the real deal, authentic, untainted. A person who is genuine, authentic, or honest. The term comes from a character in a 1717 play by Susanna Centlivre, who was noted for her sincerity. Number 40, circumbendibus, a roundabout or indirect way of speaking, a long-winded explanation or approach of all the ways to describe something unnecessarily roundabout, like someone telling a rambling story or traveling a different way to get somewhere. This word, dating to 1681, shows how much fun we had combining prefixes and suffixes to make new words. Number 39, Lobsterback, a cheeky jab at British soldiers with their bright red coats.
Number 38, speaking of coats, Redcoat also referred to those same Brits, while 37, Bluecoat honoured our Continental Army heroes. 36, Yankee was first used by the British. It was meant to mock the 1624 Dutch settlers by referring to them all as Jan, pronounced in the Dutch way with the J sounding like Y, Jan, but later, Americans turned it into a badge of honour. Even now we refer to something that's wonky as Janky. New Amsterdam was permanently changed to New York in November 1674. Look for some more Dutch slang and adopted words in a future video. 35. Tory, a loyalist colonist who remained faithful to the British Crown, such as Benjamin Franklin's own son William Franklin, who was the last royal governor of New Jersey, 1763 to 1776. 34. Ever heard of Tarleton's Quarter? It meant no mercy, named after the brutal Banastre Tarleton. 33. Whig was all about independence. The term Whig began as a short form of Whigamore, a term originally used by people in the north of England to refer to cattle drovers from western Scotland who came to Leith to buy corn. The Scottish cattle drivers would call out Twig or Twig and Botar, meaning away or to the road. This sounded to the English like Whig, and they came to use the word Whig or Whigamore derisively to refer to these people. 32 and 31, the clap and the pox. Glaring problems and pressing issues of the day were gonorrhea, also known as the clap, the drip, or the dose, and syphilis, also known as the pox, bad blood, the great imitator, lose, or Cupid's disease. They were significant sexually transmitted disease threats before the availability of penicillin in the middle 1940s. Medical records from the Revolutionary War indicate that these STDs had a significant impact in lost personnel days among members of the Continental Army. That would indeed give rise to wondrous remedies such as la douche pour les jolies dames.
30, Sons of Liberty. Those were the fearless patriots shaking up the British rule. 29, Powder Monkey sounds cute, but it was a tough job bringing gunpowder to the cannons.
28. Turncoat? That was the ultimate betrayal, switching sides. So next time you hear some of these words, remember that you're speaking the language of revolutionaries. 27. Skedaddle was a runaway or deserter. 26. Ragtag was a poorly supplied rebel soldier.
25. Minutemen, colonial militia ready to fight at a minute's notice.
24. Continental, a term used to describe soldiers of the Continental Army or the currency issued by the Continental Congress. 23. Huzzah appeared in the previous video on colonial-era slang as well. It's a cheer of approval or celebration, like we might use hurrah or yay today.
22. Brown Bess, a nickname for the standard issue British musket used by soldiers during the war.
21. Committeemen, members of the various revolutionary committees formed to coordinate efforts against the British.
20. Liberty pole, a pole or mast often topped with a flag or hat symbolizing freedom and resistance against the British. 19. Chuffy surly or impolite sounds a bit softer than jerk.
18. Firecake or ash cake, a simple type of bread made from flour and water and salt, if the soldiers happened to have it, often eaten by soldiers during the war. They mixed the ingredients together, formed it into a cake, and baked it on a rock in the fire, on a bannock board or plank, or over the fire, usually in the ashes until blackened.
17. 40-shilling freeholder, a person who owned land worth 40 shillings, which was the minimum qualification to vote.
16. Liberty cap, a hat symbolizing freedom and the pursuit of liberty, often worn by revolutionaries. 15. Rebel, a term for American colonists who fought against British rule.
14. Popeye, a term used to describe someone who is not easily fooled or is tough. I'm guessing that's who the 20th century cartoon character is modeled after and named for, and would have been seen to be a bit chuffy when angered by the even more chuffy Brutus.
13. Scalawag, a derogatory term for a person who was perceived as a traitor or troublemaker, used in the post-revolutionary period but had origins in the era.
12. Rogue, a term for someone who was seen as dishonest or untrustworthy, often used to describe British soldiers or loyalists. 11. To take a turn, to take a chance or opportunity, often used in the context of leadership or military strategy.
10. Quartermaster, An officer responsible for the supply and logistical needs of the troops.
9. Hessian, a term for German soldiers hired by the British to fight against the American revolutionaries.
8. Liberty tree, a symbol of resistance and freedom, often referring to trees where protesters would gather.
7. Bunkum nonsense or empty talk, derived from a term used in the 18th century.
6. Rattletrap, a term for something that is old, worn out, or unreliable, often used to describe makeshift equipment. Today we use the term to describe an old car.
5. Hardtack, a type of dry, hard biscuit used as a staple food for soldiers. 4. Drum major, a leader of the military band who was responsible for directing the music and often leading troops. Amazingly, we still have drum majors leading school marching bands out onto football fields and in parades. Producer and drum major Narda Michael Walden, shown here at Plainwell High School with trombonist Don Agnew. Band uniforms, in fact, resemble military uniforms from this period. 3. Fiddlesticks, an expression used to dismiss something as unimportant or trivial. Fiddlesticks were actually used to add percussion to old-time and Cajun fiddle music, allowing two people to play the fiddle at the same time. While the fiddler plays in normal fashion, a second person uses a pair of straws, sticks, or knitting needles to tap out a rhythm on the strings over the upper fingerboard, between the bow and the fiddler's fingering hand, also called beating the straws or playing the straws. This technique probably arose in the eastern United States.
2. Patriot, a colonist who supported American independence from Britain. And now number 1, kedge. Definition: to move a ship by hauling in on a small anchor, a kedge anchor, that has been carried out ahead of the vessel. In a broader sense, it could also mean to proceed cautiously or slowly in a particular direction. Context: we had to kedge the ship out of the harbor. If you lived in a country town in colonial-era New England and someone asked how you were doing, you might have replied kedge. It also means in good health.
Language history never sounded so cool, right? Catch you next time as Slangwich buffs.
Don't forget to subscribe and ring that Liberty bell.